as you know, we're getting more and more reports of Hamas and their networks going back on their promises in terms of releasing hostages, right? Obviously, the hostage situation is very, very hectic, but there are also reports, too, that there are Americans that still might be behind those lines that have been taken captive. We're trying to vet and see if Americans are still under this hostage situation by Hamas. In your opinion, as somebody who has studied this conflict very well, and as somebody who is posting constantly about it, and rightly so, what do you think should be done from a U.S. government perspective to properly vet and make sure that Americans are safe and out of harm's way right now?
Well, clearly, and I think there has been very few examples that would compare to the legitimacy of this war, which is how legitimate the war that Israel is waging in order to make sure that Hamas cannot start another egregious, barbaric act of war and terror that they did on October 7th. And for every American that feels that after 9/11 we were legitimately appropriate in invading Afghanistan and making sure that Al-Qaeda was not able to do what it did to the lives of 3,300 plus Americans that perished on 9/11. Ultimately, Israel just suffered, I think, an equivalent of 50 times that proportionately to their population, and it included a pogrom door to door with rape and horrific terror against women and children and babies. And I'm sure many of your viewers have read and seen all of these horrific details. And Just War is about responding so that this doesn't ever happen to Israel again. Yes, in the fog of war, the groups like Hamas will try to spin propaganda and claim some type of moral equivalency. But listen, this is not simply a rogue terror group the way Al-Qaeda was. This is a terror organization still listed as an FTO that was actually running Gaza, that was actually elected by the Palestinians. So essentially, even though they didn't have a state per se, they were a functioning organization that the people of Gaza should feel accountable to. So if anyone is a victim of Israel's response, the Palestinians are a victim of Hamas that got them into this war. And really, if Hamas does not want to pay the price in order to respond, they need to lay down their weapons, subject themselves to the mercy of Israeli courts, and also the government leadership needs to also present themselves. So not only the military arm, but the governmental arm needs to surrender so that they can no longer run the area of Gaza. That's the only solution. And also obviously release the hostages that are a example of what Hamas does in order to protract the war, to make it appear that somehow they are victims and get the attention of the West. And I'll end on this part, which is, I cannot believe the coverage and the demonstrations in the West, in universities and in media, that seem to forget about the hostages, that seem to somehow think that they're disconnected from the method of war that was not only done on October 7, but we're continuing to hear that some of them escaped and were handed back to Hamas terrorists by citizens in Gaza that turned them back as they tried to escape. So it goes on, and this is a just war that needs to be finished by the Israelis until Hamas surrenders.